So
All right, you
that's
get out.
Now we have a quorum, right, Michael?
yeah, right.
Very
I
good,
guess this is the
Gino.
old vote early and often.
All right.
Okay,
Oh,
moving
God.
on. Let's go back to the main thing that we were that we started with last week, the last meeting, is what it is we want to do, what our membership is interested in terms of how, and I guess in this case it's mainly me, Andy, and Fred chiming in about, while we still have the aggregation issue to monitor and factor into what other things we do. What are the kind of activities that each of us want to do there, and how we support whatever Gino and Dorothea do. And so it sort of overlaps with what makes sense for the whole effort, especially with the whole outreach stuff that we've been talking about. And so I don't know whether you guys have put any thought. I can go and do some ideas, or whether you guys have something you want to talk about.
Can you pull up the draft that we've been working off of?
Oh,
Or is that-
we didn't have a, actually, that reminds me of another draft, the draft of the looking for new members. That I guess I forgot to cover in that previous agenda item about membership. Did we decide that we're going to just advertise for new members right away, as opposed to waiting to see how our new charter goes and things like that?
I don't see any reason to wait for the new charter necessarily. If people are interested, I don't think wording in a charter is going to turn them away or make them come.
Then I guess the question is whether it's a matter of, I sent it out. I guess if we just agree to do it, maybe the most efficient way is for Dorothea, Gino, Andy, whether you look at the draft that was just sent out. I guess it was either today or last night, and see if you have any real comments. And then if I think it all makes sense for us to basically then just start posting it in places.
Right.
And from a open meeting law perspective, if you have comments, maybe just send them individually to me, so we're not deliberating. And then I can finalize the draft, send it back to Michael, and we can distribute it.
Yeah,
Right.
will do.
So let's just do that. Do that in the next few days. So we can
Okay.
moving it.
Yeah.
I'll give it a deadline. Do it this week.
Yes.
We can do something next week.
Okay.
Then coming back to the issue that of whether we have a list. I mean, I guess I could step back and say, in terms of activities that we each want to do, or what we want to do as a committee, is how much we have the overall umbrella thing that, in a way, is we have the town municipal energy use that we're trying to green and basically decrease, lower its cost, and make more green. And we're waiting to hear on the Green Communities Act. And then we have the grant to do work on that. And then there's solar, do it solar on the buildings, has been the main thrust on the municipal side of us.
There is one, not to interrupt, but there is one other possibility that Upper Charles Climate Action is working with a group, and Dorothea, you're aware of them, who are, I think it's Framingham, Ashland, Holliston, and Natick, are doing a solarized program, and they're just at the very beginning of it. They vetted their vendors, but they haven't even announced it yet. But one of the things we could do is keep an eye on that, see how that runs and how it goes, and maybe bring it into Sherborn, Dover, Medfield, Weston, all of whom have expressed some interest. But I'll keep my eyes on that from UCCA's perspective. It'll be a few months before we know how well this is going to go for them, and then just steal everything they've done and utilize it for a different set of towns.
Right, that's the issue on the residential side. Just to finish on I don't know, Gino, whether there's anything on the municipal side
Oops, sorry.
that besides what I just summarized, whether that we're sort of, other than, well, I could talk more about it, the whole idea of doing solar and it's gonna overlap with what's coming later.
There's electric vehicles and equipment that, I mean, especially if you notice the Ford come out with the F-150 Lightning truck that could certainly be, I think, an asset to DPW in the relatively near future, especially with green communities and the subsidies for electric vehicles. I don't think cover the entire cost difference, the cost difference, but with the fuel savings also and the maintenance savings, I think in the life cycle cost is lower than with gasoline powered and vehicles.
Is the
From what I've heard,
DPW,
the price is supposed to be really competitive on the Lightning as well. I've been hearing some preliminary information on it.
So
is the town, is the town thinking about other equipment, like, I don't know, weed whackers or whatever, being replaced with electric versus gas?
Yes, and we've done some, do you guys see this?
It's pretty fuzzy.
Oh, see, I don't, probably, it's kind of like we looked at this last year in September when Sharon McPherson was still around as financial director. I checked out a fair that was done in Lexington where they exhibited robo-mowers. And Lexington has obviously quite a bit of open spaces, sports fields, and that kind of nature. And they have bought a fleet of these kind of like automowers. And we wanted to look into, when Sharon was still around, basically parsing out what we are currently paying to maintain or mowing our fields, our municipally managed fields, so to speak. Gino, and I think we left off at some point and this fell onto the back burner, but I would love to revive this possibly over the summer, to do some spreadsheet work to understand what costs we have and do some kind of like cost benefit analysis on these robomowers. It's interesting to me as a European born American, I go back to Europe and there are everywhere is using these robomowers, and people use them to vacuum their homes. They use them for mowing their lawns. I mean, it's much more kind of like adapted into like residential use than it is here. That is my current understanding. Gino, anything that I missed in that regard?
No, I think you covered it.
Yeah.
So, I'll step back and say from a higher level for our discussion here is whether so that's another component of what we could do with it for the town operations.
Yeah.
The electrifying equipment, and it includes electrifying to see what can be done with the police cruisers. that they could be
Exactly.
Buying whether there's a way of doing a hybrid or not. And the question for me, I'd pose it this way for the sake of the meeting, is whether, that whole nexus of things that we're just talking about, whether that fits with what you have time for and priorities, and to what extent you need help doing it occasionally or look to us, versus is that a reasonable priority for what you see as what you're doing with your sustainability coordinator time?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and whether you, and in a way you have to, I don't know how much you have to just come to us when you want some assistance with some of those tasks, but whether you, it's just a matter of plowing ahead with that whole list Obviously, the solar is something that we'll come back to. That's something that I think is bigger, that I'd like to do some work with you on. And whether with Dorothy on maybe the electric equipment and stuff, but whether the vehicles is maybe a
Yeah.
priority while we see until what happens with the Green Communities Grant.
Right. And I want to say here, as we all know, and I think Brad, you know as well, and Marianne, that we do have our biggest contributor or sector of contribution to townwide GHG emissions is individual transportation. So for us to move on that as quickly as we can, and as wholesome as we can, meaning like from the town side as well from the residential side, is something that I view in my outreach activity to be front and center, because I think there will be a lot of stuff happening in our adjacent communities that we can synchronize and leverage. And I've started with the first webinar across 4 communities that was not very well attended. I think 20 people showed up, but I'm planning to do more in the fall. And luckily, now I have the list of all EV and hybrid owners through the Department of Energy Resources that I can individually reach out to and ask them for being an ambassador or sharing the information on the website, and start maybe a group where people can contact their neighbor and ask them, what's the deal with the Tesla? What's the deal with the Bolt? Because that's how I did it. When I wanted an EV, I really had my friends talk about their cars and what's not so great about them and what's really great about them. And I think that's kind of trust, and neighbor to neighbor conversation will help us in that regard.
Excellent. I mean, that's moving on into the residential side, once we've
Mhm.
covered, whether in terms of priorities that you have, and for the town, if we're going to really make an impact. That electric vehicles is clearly, or just electrifying some level of our transport is a big deal. And I guess you've already, as you said before, that's a priority for you. The question is what you want to do and what help you want from others
Mhm.
in doing that, in terms of, I guess you have to sort of figure out what it is that's a good use of your time and our time.
Yeah.
Smart. It's a tricky one for me.
Mhm.
How do you
Well,
get that help?
you know, as you all know me since a year, I look around and ask people what works and what did not work, because I'm not in the business of reinventing the wheel.
Right.
Limited time, and if I see something that had a really good impact, I'm trying to emulate this for our community. So what I know is that, for example, a community right next door to Needham, Wellesley, had an EV kind of like situation or fest, or how you want to call it, exhibit at the DPW and of the MLP, right? The DPW and the MLP are next door in Wellesley. So they did, I think they did this in fall or in spring, I can't remember. It's probably 5 years ago. And they had several EV owners show up with their EV, and it was all different models. Plus they had a couple of tables where, they had, I can imagine Gecko is going to come. I can imagine some other dealers will show up with particular cars that are currently, really working for a particular group of residents. Let's say a car that, a Bolt or something like that, that a lot of people buy in the suburbs. And I want to put something together like that with the help of residents, because I think it's much better for us if we have people out there that can vouch for a product. Because if you go down and switch a car from an internal combustion engine to electric, it's a big deal. For us, it was like we would dip our toe in a complete new technology, and we were like, wow. And we will never, ever go back to an internal combustion engine, ever. But it might not be the case with a lot of people. They might just feel, oh, oops, this is too techy. Or what do I do when this and that situation arises? And I think once you can address these kind of questions in a one-on-one conversation, that's the best situation you can have.
And Dorothea, just to be clear, I've mentioned this before, but Upper Charles Climate Action is intending in the fall to do a fest.
Mhm.
So we should just coordinate together with
Exactly.
Matt as well and anybody else, Julian, whoever.
Exactly.
See
So
if we
this
can make
is
this a multi-town big thing.
right.
Just to be aware that the UCCA already has some thinking in progress there. So maybe you could
Yeah.
join one of our meetings and we could take it from there.
Absolutely. And
I just have a quick comment too, when there's space for it.
Sure, make it.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's also important to recognize that, you know, electricity isn't intrinsically a green technology. It's how the electricity is generated. And so I think that's going to be an important consideration too, that needs to be taken into account in terms of, like, you know, when the town does adopt some, like an electric fleet of vehicles, what is going to be generating that electricity that's going to be charging those vehicles? I mean, do we have like the solar capacity to do that? And, you know, for my house, I mean, you know, you get to choose, thankfully, in Massachusetts, what your source of electrical generation is. And, you know, so I have a pretty competitive rate with hydropower that, you know, is billed is identified as a green source. But that's just something to consider. And then a question actually is, I wonder when, and I don't know the answer to this, is when is the optimal time to change out a vehicle? You know, an internal combustion vehicle to an electric? Is it, you know, mid-life cycle? Is it near the end of its life cycle? Because there is, you know, there is a carbon footprint to manufacturing a vehicle as well. And I'm not sure if these, you know, all electric vehicles are being manufactured in a fully green way. And so I think the process or the question is a little complicated. And I don't know the answer, but it's just something that, you know, I think needs consideration.
There has been research, Brad, on it, and I honestly I can't quote it or say where it is. But what I did hear was that the overall life cycle of an electric vehicle, even if charged off the grid, is better for
Yeah.
carbon than the overall life cycle of a internal combustion, regardless of how you're charging the vehicle. And I wish I had that right here and I could say, check this out, but I don't know where it is. Maybe Dorothea, do you have any idea where that is?
Yes, I'm jumping to my LinkedIn because I just posted something exactly on that topic and I can forward this to the group. It's funny that, you know, Brad is bringing up this question, right? What's happening in our market right now is just bonkers, right? I mean, look at these. I want to go to Europe. I cannot get a rental car because rental cars now, everybody has rental cars because the used car market is just, you know, exploding in price. So, of course, there will be probably a good point that you can determine when it's best to switch an internal combustion to electric in terms of economic. But we're in a moving landscape here, and I think as when it was our decision, we never really looked at the money. It was more like, you know, thinking about the winter and if that new technology was going to perform as the internal combustion engine. That was our biggest concern. What do we do?
I mean, there's the economic,
Yeah.
you know, there's that economic inflection point, but there's also the green inflection point. And
Yes.
that was kind of more the angle to my question is like, is there actually like, could it potentially be a not green choice to quickly swap out a new internal combustion engine vehicle for an electric vehicle?
Yes.
I would probably say that this is where I guess I'm of the feeling that having done a lot of the detailed work, like let's say, let's do all that kind of little nitty gritty, what's the embedded carbon and in doing it, or just saying that when you give up a new car, it's somebody else is going to use it. That whether it's how much we factor in those, I can't tell. Sometimes I almost want to call it a nuance versus the fact that we have this issue of just trying to get people to do enough of a technology shift, whether the cars, the demand for electricity leads, whether we have enough green energy, versus do we have to put in the green energy first before we electrify our demands, that I personally feel like I just want to get it all moving. And if the timing's a little bit off, whether you're not optimized when you convert from a internal to an electric, or whether are you green, or is your electricity green enough and you're shifting to it. I guess I feel like we're such behind the curve on needing to do this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to worry about the timing of it. I just want to move ahead more bluntly and crudely, maybe, with these things, and that things will even out over the years. Is that, I mean, I can think and I think of that more from a programmatic side. As an individual, I might sit around and do those, a little more of that sort of microeconomics of it all. But somehow I feel like for us, it's just good to get people to shift, even though it might not be a perfect solution.
That
Can I
makes a lot of
just-
sense.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry, can I just jump in for a second? This is Marion. I'm not an expert in this, but I thought Brad's point about the source of the electricity that charges the vehicles is, you don't hear enough about that.
Yes.
And so in our town, as we begin to install electric charging stations at Town Hall, maybe at Farm Pond, so we'll hear from Artemis. How would your deal with Eversource or whoever, how would your aggregation work? Who does that? And is the town part of the aggregation?
Town can be part of it, but we hopefully will, and probably will be, and we'll probably also try to get more of the solar for the town. But I would say, I guess to that, there's going to be at some point, and I think as Fred said, it might be a wash even, whether if you're using electricity from the grid, and it's only maybe 26% renewable, and there's efficiencies with an electric vehicle, and there's less air, and there's other kind of benefits besides just the carbon. There's less air pollution.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean to imply that switching to electric vehicles is not good. It was just a matter of the logistics, as we get more charging stations in town, what's the jurisdiction over?
Well, I'm hoping that we will be greening the electricity over time. If it's a charging station at Town Hall and we're charging for it, depends whether we get the town to do the aggregation at the same time as we're trying to do solar on the town buildings.
That's right. I'm just putting the town doing the aggregation kind of on the radar screen.
And the issue is, I mean, it promotes the whole issue with aggregation of whether we get people to really sign up for 100% green. I mean, when we start pushing electric vehicles and people are charging at their homes at night, to what extent that you have to package it with the fact that, do you do solar, or do you do aggregation where you get 100% green energy, or at least maybe 50% or 60%, that we have as a default, whatever the default is, that maybe more people go, that it's going to be, I think it's going to be a bit greener and has the potential to be greener. And that's part of what electrifying your household demands, is the fact that the grid might not be green, and the grid might have need some bolstering and development over time. But it's that, how coordinated could you be? Hopefully, once you have enough demand there, and then you get more.
The organization that regulates taxis and for hire vehicles in New York City made electric vehicles exempt from its.
Sorry about that. I was just pulling up the info from the LinkedIn that I wanted to share with you all. Multitasking.
But but in the end, I think we'll be able to up our green content of electricity, and maybe not necessarily the same exact time patterns when we're driving more of the demand to electricity, but there'll be some. I think it'll in the multi-year, looking out number of years, it'll be for the better, even if there's some disconnects in the short run.
Yeah, right. I have no argument with that.
And so it's more a matter of how you get people doing it, and like the kind of thing with Dorothea, whether does a multi-town thing work better, or do you actually, would people prefer it to be just Sherbonites? and to what extent did the Wellesley thing really lead to more people adopting electric vehicles or not? Is it, I mean, we'll find out whether it's worth our time and effort. We have limited time and effort, and what effort makes a difference. I mean, the same demonstration could be done for battery powered chainsaws and blowers and weed whackers. We can have the same thing that they had up in, was it Lexington? Whether we need to have a little show here at DPW where people can come and
Yeah.
try out these things.
Exactly.
And see what it's like to do that kind of stuff. But I mean, those are things essentially that you, Dorothy, I'll come back and say that we have 15 minutes before we're going to shift. That, right, you have to, we all can brainstorm about what are the priorities for our time in terms of which of these activities are best for electric vehicles, what are going to be best for dealing with the heating and cooling. Because we've identified heating and cooling.
And, simultaneously, as it crops up everywhere, we're trying to coordinate with others that are trying to do the same. So I think what's tremendously helping us is to visualize, you know, the GHG, our climate action plan, to visualize what it means if we have 10 households switch over to electric car, what that means in terms of like a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, because we were plugged in our cars as Sherbornites. We have no public transportation. And we need to visualize these gains we can achieve by swaying, you know, a certain amount of households to, you know, at least replacing one of two cars with an electric car.
No, it's just a matter of how we prod that process and
Right.
what accelerates it or what doesn't turn out to accelerate it. Like when you give a party and nobody shows, or a bunch of people show up and you get 2 or 3 cars. Is that enough to do our effort?
No, I think.
I guess Artemis has got his finger up there.
I just want to add, as an electric car owner, my biggest impediment is there's not enough charging
Yeah.
around anywhere.
Mhm.
You have to
Yeah,
sometimes drive hours to get a charging station. And I think if we have a charging station for our police force, for our fire force, not that all their vehicles have to be that, but as transition, I had a conversation with Sergeant Bento, and he was thrilled with the idea of electric police cars because A, they're quieter and they require very little maintenance compared to what they do now. So those
True.
two alone, you know, quieter cars is a good part of being part of a police force, you know, and I think having electric cars are much easier to maintain. So, you know, what do we do to create autonomy for the police station and build infrastructure that allow people to have electric cars in town?
Right. I mean, that's why I don't want to do the lead of, like, I talk to people about an all electric car and they're like, oh, how do I do my road trips? And so maybe in a way it's hard to do the cell, even though hardly, who knows how many really does a road trip that's more than 200 or 300
Right.
miles.
Right. On that point, charging stations in Sherborn would benefit the town vehicles like the police, and as Artemis said, but it's not going to benefit the town's people. Nobody's going to go to town hall to charge their car and then drive it in their driveway where they could charge it in the first place. But it also, I think, having town charging stations shows other towns and, you know, adjacent communities that Sherborn supports electric vehicles and greenhouse gas reduction. And for that purpose alone, marketing, I think it's very important.
Yeah, we all have to do it together. And so agreed. And but yeah, no, so
I got to jump off, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. I'll try to connect in once I get my kiddo to karate, but I'm sorry to miss the rest of the presentation. Everything's really interesting. Thank you so much, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
So coming around to, so on electric vehicles, we just have to, I guess we'll try some things and see what makes a difference, whether it's collaborating with others, do a demonstration. And I guess the big comes back to whether it goes back to the original thing on just the town operations and with the Gino sort of purview of what can we do to electrify some of the vehicles and do some charging, because right, the police thing, they want to put up a little garage-like shed out there to protect the cars, whether we put solar on top of it. It's part of that whole push that I would and solar on the buildings. So, but I guess it's so from a bigger picture again, there's this whole thrust on the electric vehicles, and then there's this thrust that we're doing on other major household carbon uses, which is basically air conditioning and heating is the other thing there, and maybe the hot water, I guess. Yeah. And whether I guess we're going to do something on hot water because the group of us want to do it, and
we should feature if we all four get like the air source heat pump over the water heater. We should feature how that brings down our energy consumption and make that a story. So people, because it's not that big of an investment, it's not as big and deep as the air source heat pumps for heating and cooling. But they're still have very short payback time. And I would be happy if I could take the lead and reach out to David Green and say, hey, we want to do a group purchase, and then eventually pick maybe an installer, save a little bit on the cost, and then run as a pilot, like, 5 or 10 people in Sherborn get together, negotiate a little bit better pricing.
well, maybe you should we do a little advertising, and whether it's in the paper or the town website or on, or to say anybody who's about to replace their hot water heater,
Right, but
got an option here. If you're about to do this, talk to us about something we want to do as that's good for money and the environment.
Michael and everybody, one of the challenges I think we have, what we're trying to do is convert those in our town who are not interested in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I think the way to do it is visibility. The more projects that are underway that are visible to the community, the more people are going to start taking it more seriously. That's why I was very interested in Artemis's Farm Pond solar project. I mean, that has ultimate visibility in the town. But we should, I think, make that a priority. That is, projects that have visibility. Listen, I'm all in favor of any project that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, be it hot water heat pumps or something else. But Dorothy, your website's terrific. I mean, that's another thing that gets visibility.
Nice to hear that, Andy. We all worked hard on this. This was for me, as we all know, it was a learning curve, honestly.
Right.
But we got detail and stuff, but I think the product came out fine, and I hear good things from many people.
Yeah, but I think marketing is very important in trying to convince people that we take it seriously and they should too.
Yeah, and just not to make this very long, I want to absolutely agree on that, Andy, because I've seen it happening in Needham when we did the Solarize. The moment you have visibility in the paper, when people talk about that, when you bring projects to the school, for example, we could have the Down to Earth Club. The kids could look at could use Google Earth and find those very good roofs in our community and write letters to these residents and say, we want you to consider. This is what worked in Needham, and I would be shocked if we had no recourse of these proven leverage methods in Sherborn. And it helps mostly if you do it through the schools and the existing institutions, organizations at the same time. When you basically converge various, you have find like this inflection point where, things people start to talk about, and then you pick it up through the paper, you pick it up through more videos, you pick it up through different avenues. And then you will see people that were formerly sitting on the sideline finally
Right,
ready to go.
I agree.
So we don't have much time left in this
Yeah.
discussion of whether, questions, do we need a list of whether you want to compile from your point of view, Dorothy, what's the list of specific things to do over the next few months or so, and what help is needed, and that are all the little concrete things to do. And for example, on the heat pump, is it a matter of, do we just have a small group that we already know about? Do we advertise for a slightly expanded group and then do it? We just have to make those decisions and pick a path and do it.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, we could start with a smaller group and see who wants to get added on along the way, but just that somebody is spending the time, whether you have the time to just sort of post it on, whether it's next door,
exactly.
that a group of us are looking into this thing here, and we're interested in other people, especially if you're about to replace your hot water heater. This is going to be a good money maker and for the
I'm
environment.
happy to take the lead. I don't think it takes a whole lot of like technical calculations like it would if we were going for a full air source heat pump for heating and cooling. I
Oh, yeah,
think
especially if you're
straightforward
replacing.
swap out. The question for me is like, at what point from the installer, right, from the vendor and installer, how many people do you have to have in your boat that you could finally start negotiating on pricing, right? Is it 10 people? Is it 15 air source heat pump in a radius of 15 miles? Or, I mean, how does the business model work?
You can ask David Green who he's used and liked on that, and whether we
Yeah.
and somebody else. And I can't tell who they used in the Upton Med. We have to get a few vendors and call them up and ask them or you can ask them what makes a difference. Especially
Right.
since it's the kind of, for many of us who don't need it urgently, it's the kind of thing that they could just use as a filler when they have downtime. Here's a project you can do. It's the kind of day effort.
Right.
So that that might be part of getting a good pricing for that. And so, yeah, if you take the lead, it's just a matter of, right, we just have to, if you want to make up a laundry list of things,
Yeah.
bad way of things that we want to do against these issues that are going to reduce carbon, and then we can sort of see who wants to sign up and help out and what help you need, so that it would help us, the rest of us, sort of pool our resources better.
Right.
And that's what I was just trying to get at in this whole discussion, is to get this sort of list of to-do things, and we agree on the priorities and we agree who's going to work on what. So that it's not just a matter of what we talk about at this meeting, but we're actually getting some stuff done, separate from the
Yeah.
drill
So
going here.
what I'm hearing is certainly from Fred's side that UCCA that is spanning over several communities in their membership can help to make this EV Fest, can be a partner in the outreach, can be a partner in so many things that we can discuss, Fred, on the side, maybe with Michael. But I think the fall is a good time after a very hot summer. I finally see it in the press, it's sinking in with people that we are stuck with climate change. It's not going to go away, and it's man-made, and more people are waking up to a reality that for a long time they were trying to ignore. And I think we will have like people like Brad and people that are a little bit younger, the millennials, I think fully understand that, and they're scared. And when I talked to my son last night, who was 22, was asking me, Mom, give me a date or a year when people finally understand we're fucked. And I was just like, sorry for using that word, and I should not use it in a public meeting. But I just wanted to give you the idea what a 22-year-old feels like when he hears and reads the news. Because it means that at a certain point in your time in life, when you want to start a family, you are stuck with a problem that will aggravate a lot of things. And I think we have been asleep on the wheel. And I personally think that year will be 2032, when the world will understand that we have to find technology to get us out of this trepidation out of this crisis. And I want to put this back to the EC. And I heard Michael saying the last time, maybe we should come up with a resolution where we say we have a climate crisis. I personally find that we need that kind of discussion in town where people see how many people in our community recognize this is a problem and how many people are still on the sideline on this issue.
I think another really important part of that is, you know, you talk to millennials and they say we're whatever.
So
we need to show them and help them see that it's not gloom and doom all, that there's things they can do and we can do and we are committed to doing. I just find sometimes that there's a hopelessness that does not serve at all.
exactly. And I agree with you. To put you to the hopelessness and the desperation that's coming with this problem is not the solution.
Oh,
And
yes. No.
Marianne, I think, just raised her hand.
Yeah, you know, what Dorothea says is absolutely right. I have grandkids in that generation and, you know, the other relatives and kids that I know, they're saying exactly that. We're effed, okay? I won't use the word, although I'd love to. But it just raises an idea in my mind. This is off the top of my head, but if some sort of public program were put on by you in Sherborn to, you know, just raise the general alarm locally in a very local way, would it be more effective if some of those young people, maybe seniors in high school that are totally effective in this, be moderators or, you know, on a panel?
Absolutely.
I think we have to hear it from our own kids.
Exactly, Marianne. And that's why the outreach to the schools, including our regional schools, is essential in our climate action plan. Because we need to hear from our young folks, from our generation that carries the hope, what they want us to do. And for that, and I think it would be very effective if the select board would invite young folks from the school to speak their mind. And I don't know if you're aware that there's a sustainability task force that has been formed in the last year. And we have tremendous, I mean, I was just blown away how intelligent and insightful students are in Dover Sherborn.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just add that probably the basic organization and launching of it might have to be done by a group like you, but you know, young people should be a big part of it.
Yeah, fully agreed.
I'm going to stop this because it's already after 4:30 there. And right, in the end, we have to, as to the gloom and doom, we have to, part of leadership is portraying that
Exactly.
that positive picture of what the world looks like with a smart grid that's fed by renewables, and there's a lot of storage, and there's a peaking capacity of all sorts, and the grid is stable, and decentralized generation is around, that there is a future that can be painted that's positive without all the gloom of Texas when it got too cold, and what that there is a positive future that can see our way through this problem. But on that note, we didn't get to a bunch of other things, but yes, it's after 4:30, and we have Artemis and his colleagues Chuck and Tom, and I don't know who else is anybody else joining? You're on mute, Artemis.
Yeah, we have, how much time do we have, Michael, to present and have question and answer? And what I'd love is to give you a 20-minute presentation of 2 sets of
Sure.
presentations and then have a Q&A. Does that
Yep.
work?
That works fine. And some might drop off at some point, but I've got a bunch of time now. And
All right, great. Well, everything you've been speaking about is exactly our motivation and our excitement. And my property at 197 Lake Street borders on the town property of the parking lot and farm pond. And so our vision is to create an aesthetically beautiful solar project that winds itself down my property, down the parking lot to the bathhouse. And we have the first draft of that design to share with you for input and discussion. And some of the calculations, I want to introduce two of my team members, Tom Weinman, who is going to take the lead on this presentation, and then our civil engineer, Chuck Semiotis. You know, what we're very proud of is that we feel like we can start a conversation with the community about what those ambitions are, and to do a project that really is an example of aesthetic design and solar coming together. So in that spirit, Tom, would you introduce yourself, my friend, and take us through the first set of slides? And then if we could share a screen
You
on
can
the
share the screen at
presentation.
any point. You can take
All
it
right.
over.
But Tom, introduce yourself, my friend.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Energy Committee for having a great meeting with great topics on a super hot day.
Yeah.
I heard only a little bit of the lead up to this, but it sounds like you've got a lot of good thinking going into your future's guidance that you're going to be applying to the town. And I really like to present our ideas and work with you on, you know, from our philosophies, which is to, you know, to present very reasonable scaled and productive, innovative systems that match the environments they go into and the needs of the communities, and looking out for the benefits to the communities. That's the spirit we like to work with people on, and, you know, design systems that are high performance, and use the latest technology, but also look to the future to have adaptability and, you know, will benefit everyone in their ability to be resilient and, you know, long-term, sustainably oriented, and benefiting the people of the community, you know, across the board. And with an eye to community benefits rather than, you know, just getting into do a project, provide clean energy as it is, as it's pictured today, and not really look at the long-term benefit and future to the community.
Okay. We look
So,
forward to this.
I'm sorry?
Look forward to the presentation.
Yeah, and do you have the PDF?
Oh, do you
Yeah.
want me to put it, or you have it there? I can.
I would prefer if you put it up.
Put it up. That would be great, Michael.
Okay, let me,
You can skip the first page.
which one? I guess let me share my, something here, and then you can tell me which file you want to look at here. This is, I have these two files here. I'm not sure whether this is the file you wanted to start with.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, fine. You tell me when to click and I'll click. You want me to go
Okay.
down?
Yeah. So we specialize in, you know, we've been doing this sort of consulting and guidance and development with lots of different agencies across the state, and for over 20 years, since the before the utility deregulation time in the late 90s. We've helped adapt policy to be favorable to renewables and interconnection of clean energy. We like to guide people through the sort of big picture of energy usage, not just looking at one type of energy, like only electricity, only you know, electrons, but where other uses of energy and where other carbon footprint issues are, whether it be through, energy efficiency measures and, reducing usage of other fuels for transportation, that sort of thing. So we also look to right scale things and put in quality equipment in a manner that serves the, performs the highest for the scale, and also is adapted to the scale the community goes into or the application it goes into. So what we did here with this proposal was pull together a portion of what this is just an outline draft proposal, and it goes on a number of assumptions about the use of energy for a community project, a community solar project, and the benefits would be spread around depending on how that community project was funded. And Artemis can go into some of those ideas for the type of structure that would be funding this community project. But the benefits could be spread to, municipal buildings or nonprofits in the town, or some of the investors. The benefits could go to underserved members of the community that need assistance, that sort of thing. That is, we can assign the energy and direct the energy through virtual net metering. And you may have seen proposals to do this sort of thing on your other properties in the past. I've not reviewed any of those, not seen any of those other proposals. And obviously there may be opportunities to do projects elsewhere in town. And, we thought we should go into Artemis's neighborhood in the Farm Pond area because it's obviously a very valuable resource for the community, and we wanted to obviously present a sort of an optimal way to develop a solar project in that area. Going at this page is kind of boring, but it just gives you the basic assumptions of what we put into the proposal. This proposal is basically just a snapshot of a quarter scale of the project, and it represents one element in that first element in that project, sort of the center solar parking canopy. That's the middle one there, just below the entry gate area of the parking lot.
One here, just that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so it represents this proposal that I'm showing you, and I'll go through in more detail. It represents that center area only, and basically it's about 1/4 scale, plus or minus, of course, because this is a preliminary proposal, but it's a 1/4 scale of the total, available project areas that we identify in this slide here. It would be either a phase one, or it would be just an element of the total project, depending on how people feel about the scope of the project. But it's just to give you a representative, feeling for what we could do with a creative solar project that still encompasses the, combined and multi-purpose uses of the area there. If you could go to the next slide, Michael, please.
Sure. So the 153 watts is just that one central area that you were talking about.
Yeah, the 153 kW,
Yeah.
or just over 150 kW in capacity. It would produce about 150 megawatt hours a year. And the equivalent, this quarter scale, that would be the equivalent of about 16, moderate residential homes in Sherborn. the energy consumption annually for about 16 moderate homes in Sherborn. If you did the total project 4 times this scale, you would, offset roughly 48 homes worth of energy use, or, we could adapt to making reference to other municipal buildings and other energy usage. That gives, we plugged a number in there to give you, to match. So that's what we call our consumption number, because this proposal tool is typically plugged into, an existing electric usage. So we're just putting an arbitrary usage in there that represents that, what I was just speaking of, the 16 homes or some other similar load in the town. And we, of course, use high quality components that have long-term warranties, and we have a long history of, good reliability. Obviously, the details of the structure can be modified depending on, exact budget and people's, interest in the aesthetics and the way we rolled it out. Those will be depicted in those diagrams. You can move on to the next slide. And this is kind of more representative of where electric bills, if you leave the standard utility rate history of the last 25, 30 years of increasing every 3% a year, basically over the next 25 years, utility rates are going to pretty much double. If you build a project with solar, if you invest that, a moderate amount of money into building a solar project, you not only get the return on the investment through savings and investment savings of the energy project, but you also get you basically lock in a levelized cost of that energy going forward. Next slide.
Just going back, so it's $31,000 savings.
Yeah, that's the first year, and it basically adds up to, in the later years, to average about $40,000 to $50,000 worth of energy every year.
This is not the whole. Okay, this is not the whole project. This is just like a representative.
Correct. That's
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So ultimately, the big number here up on the left side is, that's a quarter scale. That's basically the energy cost savings over a 25-year life of the system. These systems are actually designed so that they would outlive that. I mean, they're guaranteed output for that. But typically, as we found in actual performance in the field, solar panels keep working, and you could get 30 plus years, 40 years out of solar panels where they're still producing good, amounts of energy, and with relatively low maintenance over time. This project will return, for the quarter scale project, will return over $1 million in energy value in 25 years, in addition to paying for itself and returning to the investors. As a community solar project, the investors could be, individuals. It would provide a return to them as well, and extra dollar revenue that's through the SMART program, which is a local, it's a Massachusetts state mandate for solar projects to get extra money back over time that helps pay for the system.
Oops. Mhm. You ready for this, or?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where does the projection of 3% annual increase come from? Because I don't know, I haven't seen increases in the last several years. It seems to be the electricity prices seem to be stable, at least in the last few years, right around 10, 11 cents.
This is a 25-year historic record, is the 3% increase. A lot of solar estimators use 4%, but I like to be conservative, and it is based on factual data. I can give you the root of that data if you would like.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, the US, yeah, I mean, I've seen the stuff. I mean, the US Energy Information Agency does that kind of stuff. And right, it's a little tricky how much you can project forward from that number there. I mean, in the end, when we come down to looking at this, we probably do see what difference it makes if you use a lower number or something like that. But I mean, that's, I mean, right, when we look more closely at this, we could play around with a different escalator just to see if it makes a difference in how we move on a project. But so yeah, but yeah, no, it's been around for a long time, that 3%, and it's right, it hasn't yet. We haven't seen it. We've been quoted that number for 5 years when we did solar projects in the past. But I'm not sure that makes how much of a difference it makes in overall feasibility of whether you move ahead on some projects, but we'll find that out later. But whatever,
And
I guess,
I'd like to mention that, obviously year to year, you could have rate decreases. This is a trend over many years. And, when the prices go up, they go up considerably more than 3% in 1 year. They sometimes go up 8 or 10%. I think we haven't had a significant increase since the early 2010s, and we had a number of big increases in the 2000s that more than made up for what we haven't seen over recent years. And a lot of it has to do with the energy mix as well of the grid, and obviously the cost of fuel, if you will call it that, the cost of just the fuel of a natural gas power plant, not including the environmental degradation it causes, is a very depressed number right now. Whereas in the late 2000s, or I should say the mid 2000s, natural gas was 4 times the price it is now at a wholesale level.
Tom, let's jump into our project.
Sure.
I think this is
Let's keep
the
rolling
converted.
here on this.
it's just the, okay.
So this is the one that really shows the big picture of the return of investment like this. The project cost of, in this case, the quarter scale is about $750,000. The whole project would be about $3 million. The numbers that are influencing the return on investment and the payback are linear. So whether you did a project this size or double the size, or 4 times the size, or the full project, it would be roughly linear, because and this is with investors, in what Artemis will elaborate on a bit about, doing a community project where people do investments to, enable a return on a tax appetite. In other words, if the town itself took this on, they wouldn't, unless they had bond sales or something that would facilitate that, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the tax credits. So the tax credits are a significant part of this. In the quarter scale thing, the national tax credit is at 26% now. It might go back up to 30. We don't quite know. The depreciation is also about $200,000 over a 6-year life, and I can show you a breakout of that on a future slide. The SMART program runs 20 years for a project of this size or larger, and that also is about $200,000. So those 3 incentives alone bring the project cost from $750,000 down to about $150,000. And then you add the utility savings and so forth. That is significant impact. So the internal return on investment is about 11%, and the simple payback is about 8 years. And have a breakdown. This is a 25-year breakdown of the cash flow from the initial investment, and the comparison of the cost of power over on the left column if you didn't do anything. The performance-based incentives, which is the SMART program, is the next column to the right. Sorry, it's a very small type.
Yeah. Is there a way to blow it up a little bit, but we don't need to go into the
Well,
number?
we can let you get through the whole big picture because we'll come back and look at these in more detail.
Exactly.
But whatever, but basically here's a cash flow that supports.
It's a cash flow analysis of basically an outright investment.
Right.
When you invest, then you have
Right.
you have a national tax credit, you have depreciation schedule, and you have the performance-based incentive running 20 years in addition to the ongoing utility savings.
Yeah, I thought the depreciation schedule is even more accelerated than this, but we can come back to those kind of details.
They
Whoops.
sometimes have bonuses and this and that, which would apply.
And then,
This is a breakdown of like the first year,
right.
cash flow on the first year energy. It's showing the energy, and again, the consumption pre-solar is just a, it's just a levelized number that adds up to about the production of the system, just for comparison purposes. It is just a representative number. Obviously, I'm not, dialed into some specific, town, municipal building or something. If we wanted to customize it that way, we certainly could.
Okay. Yeah, no, we can come back to the warranty. I'm gonna go ahead since we are.
The last slide, I just wanted to point out that, you're investing in, you're investing in the infrastructure in the town that provides resilience in the future. You're providing you're providing a power source that continues to benefit participants in the community solar project. And the offset of carbon is very significant.
Yeah.
When you offset with clean energy like this, as you probably all know, and we were talking about earlier.
Right. Oh yeah, no, we're certainly living that. I guess this is the other visual kind of.
Yeah.
So let's go through the visuals a little bit.
Yeah.
The idea was to create a beautiful structure. These are translucent photovoltaics.
Oh, really?
This is all lit through. This is not a dark area. And because the parking lot is so wide, we can capture this width without cutting a single tree, which I know is very important to the town. Just Tom, describe these solar panels, what they look like,
They're instead of looking black on white or black on black, they're kind of a gray color. They have black cells, and they do filter it's like filtering light through a grid. They're not designed to be, especially translucent, like there's some skylight type panels and so forth that are much more, these are designed to be power producers. They do have the added attribute, though, if they get light reflected up from the bottom, they do actually can produce extra energy from reflected light. So that's an advantage. They're also suspended on an open frame so that lets light through naturally, as well as, allowing ventilation for the panels, which is a key to keeping the panels cool, is a key to making them perform better. And there's a lot more details to the actual elements of the install, which I could elaborate on.
Well, there's the key
Panels on both
about
sides.
stormwater damage. These roofs can help both collect water for the interior space of planting. We want it to be an environment that is fitting of Farm Pond. These pictures show just a solid project, but we would actually integrate a little bit of a green roof in different spots. And Michael, if you go back to the first, the long, the snake-like structure.
Oh, not this one. Okay.
Yeah, this one. So we're assuming that the parking area is the same area. There's an archway, a kind of welcome center, and there would be a space to check stickers, but further in, and then you'd be able to park. You'd be able to go around the parking and in on both sides. And as Tom said, this is just the first draft of it. We're not being that aggressive with the full project at this point, but we wanted to show you kind of long-term what's possible. And you all know that the land of the town goes all the way down Lake Street.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot more solar possibilities down the road. Our vision is, on this full project, this would create enough energy for about 45 to 50 homes.
Wow.
And this would also then allow us to create a microgrid for this community, for our community. And the idea long-term would be to have strategic microgrids in every community of Sherborn, fed by renewable resources like this. One of the things that we also wanted is not a steel structure, but wood that we would harvest from our own trees to build the structure. So it would be a project that would also invite students and teachers to be part of it as well, a certain kind of demonstration. So what you were saying before about making a visual project, this would be this would be a very powerful visual project. It also supply energy for the yacht club and for the lifeguards at Farm Pond.
I guess we have a lot of oak that we could use. We could sequester the oak from all of our dead oaks in town.
Exactly. And then underneath the structure, there'd be storage space for boats. There'd be storage space. So imagine instead of all those cars, you'd have a few hanging racks for boat storage in the winter, so people don't have to bring their boats all the way back home. Actually, you can see the boats there hanging. So it would be, a space where if there's a thunderstorm, a lightning storm, kids are stuck at the beach waiting for mom to get through. I've hosted probably 200 or 300 kids over the years at my house during those moments. So this would be a little more protected structure where people could wait for each other. And I think if we do it right, it could be an extension of the community center idea of Farm Pond, where you extend the season beyond just the summer months, where you bring people down to do education about energy. And then, of course, there'd be 8 to 10 plug-in chargers throughout this grid.
Artemis, I just have a simple question. The flat area that's over the cars, is that also solar panels?
Yes, everything you see there is solar.
And then what about the rain runoff? How would that be handled?
So Tom, talk about the rain runoff and how we would capture the water and store it. It'd be like a water catchment system. But
yeah, we're actually pitching those flat, what they look like in flat in this detail, because it's not highly detailed, but the initial proposal is to pitch those coverings for the cars actually towards the center by 5 degrees. So the rainwater would run off to a gutter system where the center pitch area also drains to, and then we catch that and put it in that center green space in either submerged holding tanks for reuse, or to actually use that water the plantings in the center there, or some variation on that. But I mean, we're trying to both provide safety of in the wintertime not snow sliding off those sections without having to put snow guards up. It would maintain the capture of the snow as well as capture the rainwater, as a double usage of, rather than having a runoff that you'd be associated with the existing parking lot.
We had a question or a comment from Brett over the chat, and he's saying there's plenty of downed trees lying around Sherborn for that structure.
Excellent. Tune up our sawmills.
Yeah, or in terms of the water runoff, he says could simply funnel to an underground dry well as too. Less elegant, but effective.
Yeah, I want to use this water also for some outside showers. I want to create, the feeling that you're in a place where you can clean yourself, jump in the pond, take a shower before you get out. So there would be a number of features to this.
Yeah. Let's see.
So there's no running water right now?
Oh. Sorry.
And just
Sorry.
to clarify, you see the three sections, the black part are also, that's on my property, between my property and the town. And that would be at the end, right there, yep. That's where the charging stations would be. So anyone could come down, plug in their car, go take a sail, go on the farm pond, and come back up. And it would be all power generated by this project.
And we could certainly sprinkle chargers into the parking under the structures as well, depending on demand and over time when more people have electric vehicles to plug in.
So this, so the power, I mean, it looks nice. I mean, I could see the cost. I mean, right. The creating that whole structure, that's quite nice. Because I guess I'll come back and ask, I have a number of questions on different levels. I'll come back to a bigger picture maybe first of how do you see structure? What are some of the deal structuring options you see, whether it's would it be privately funded with a PPA, or you're selling where, let's say the town is buying the electricity under like a power purchase agreement, and it's a private sort of partnership or LLC that we just negotiate a price for and a lease of the property like we did on the Public Works garage, or what do you see it? I don't know, just what are the different modes of setting this up that you're thinking about?
I think that's the central question going forward, is how do we finance this? I do believe there are private investors in town and socially responsible carbon investment funds that would be thrilled to buy $20 million of Sherborn solar bonds. And we would draw down the money and finance against it with all these credits. And the investors would benefit directly from that and get a return on their investment. And then there'd be a profit sharing between the town and the investors and the local participants. I think it is a partnership. I think the town, for this to work, we need the town's partnership on a number of levels. I think the number one thing is negotiating with Eversource and getting the best deal for the project that they can. I also want Eversource to be an investor in this. I know they tend to view projects like this as competitive, but I'd love to make this an Eversource partnership project so they don't feel like we've pushed them out of town, but they're part of this project. But I also think if you look at our tax rates, we could put an article in the town meeting for next year declaring that some percent of your taxes, a small percent, could be invested in this for a special rebate. And we can incentivize basically every town member to make a small investment that cumulatively would allow us to do this in a number of strategic areas, whether it's Pine Hill School or the high school. The high school is also, a fantastic site because it's a school and you get to educate students about this very directly. And then the students are empowered to be part of it. And that's kind of what we want, is a long-term strategy to shift our dependence on fossil fuels. So, I think that is the question, Michael.
Yeah, that's what we have to brainstorm.
I think that, for our next presentation to you, I think we should have some of those options and have some financial, firms even coming to talk to us about what they would be willing to do. I think that is where we need to really invite the community. I mean, we have so many competent financial people in town that could advise us. So I'm looking at many options, but I think this is a moment to talk about that on a grander scale for the town. Because the town doesn't have money to do all this, but the town has a certain buying power, a certain position to leverage this for the entire community.
Yeah, I mean, I'll step back on the solar, having done a little, something I want to talk to you and some other people and that are related to committee, and I didn't get a chance to update the committee itself on some discussions I've had since our last meeting about that range of how to finance, because we have Pine Hill School project, we have the fire station, we have a number of town buildings. And we might have anywhere from 400 to 600 or so kilowatts. This project here obviously could be anywhere from 150 to 4 times that as you're talking. And the issue, this one's a little bit different because this combines, it's sort of multi-purpose. It's not just clearly a solar, because at nearly $5 a watt, you're basically factoring in a bunch of other kind of uses and parking and whatever else over the fact that a project like this would normally be under $3 or $2.50 a watt or something. That could be half the price if it was a simple rooftop thing with an easy roof. So this one has another dimension of what we like Farm Pond to look like. But yeah, I'll still come back to that bigger picture of whether I don't know how you could get Eversource to be a partner. I'm not quite sure. I'm more concerned about whether this is the kind of project where we run into bottlenecks, where you'd have to do the larger scale because the transformer capacity isn't large enough at the site there. As we've reached the capacity like Ed Rose downtown, would put more solar up, except it would cost $150,000 just alone to upgrade the transformer capacity. And so we'd have to research that for a project like this here. Same thing would be for Pine Hill, but that's already a fairly large, there's probably a lot of electrical transformer capacity there anyway. And plus we'll be behind the meter for most of that, supplying the school. Here we don't have a lot of demand, so almost all of it will be exported. But yeah, just thinking about whether all the power from the town projects, and even this one, since it's on town property for the most part, could be used by the town itself. Is one model. If I just start throwing out things, and whether the town could do either a mode of where it builds and operates it itself, versus it does it with a developer model where we did on the garage, where you do where you get a PPA. The two basic models. I've talked to the committee before about setting up whether we could do this kind of an LLC where a bunch of people in town who basically deal with the accelerated depreciation and all the tax benefits, versus that mode versus the model of where the town finances it with bonds, where the town itself. And I talked to somebody today who's in the business, Sun Wealth Company, that does projects more in economic justice communities or whatever, but somebody who's done the financing. I got the sense that the financing costs of setting up the LLC and all that, which I'd be curious in your own experience, that could be quite a barrier in terms of just all the setup to do that versus doing it town financed.
Oh, okay.
It's an interesting aspect here, Michael. I
don't think so. I'm in a
Okay.
Zoom meeting.
Gino, you might have to.
That's all right, no problem.
Okay. But whatever, that's the thing we have to talk about is like, who's the consumer of the electricity and what they pay? And then how's it financed and how much is it privately financed, or whether that we can do, because the town could probably go out for 2 or 3%, and it's probably a very attractive project if it's replacing its electricity bill, that we could probably do a pro forma or just a whole financial thing that shows that it's very attractive and the town might want to be able to put $1 million of its bonding ability to this kind of, these projects, because they could easily pay off the principal and interest with the avoided electricity costs of doing it. But those are the kind of, try to simplify it to two, sort of how much we do it as a privately funded project versus whether the town funds it. And the town can't use all the tax credits, but its access to 2, 3, 4% bond money basically is possibly more savings than all those tax credits and accelerated depreciation. We have to do the comparative finance for that, and whether the town is really the ultimate consumer for any of these projects. I think since it's on town property, I mean, the town could lease the land out there, lease the site out, and the power could be sold to citizens through a Schedule Z, as it's called, that citizens can sign up and be willing to pay the current price. So there is a whole other option for where you sell electricity to residents. But I think that gets more complicated than just meeting all of the town's electricity demands, which I don't think we can meet. That's another tally we have to do.
I will say that I think if you look at the power outages of this town, how many times we're forced to deal with electrical changes, and everyone has to throw away their food in their fridge and freezer, or have a backup generator. I think the carbon offset of an electric, in a sense, power grid in this community would be very well received. And I think I've talked to almost every neighbor on Lake Street, and all of them would agree to even pay a premium to have their own power source that was connected to this project. So, and if you look around town, I think there are a lot of communities where an independent power grid in that community would be a backup for that community. And, our biggest crises in this town is an accident related to a tree falling and hitting power lines, and people, getting affected by that. We've made a choice in this town to protect trees at a tremendous, at times, compromise to our own safety. But this is one way to get power under the ground rather than in the power lines.
Oh, you're right. That's all right. That's a whole other phase of this project. Then you're really going to have a local grid, and the cost of that must be phenomenal, though. And whether that even a premium of people are willing to pay. I mean, I don't know if you've costed that out, but I could believe that running that grid up and down the street based on, I mean, I used to do work on rural electrification in developing countries or whatever, but I mean, there you could run simpler kind of lines, but I would think doing underground lines in there at who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars per mile or more of that. I mean, it'd be interesting to see the numbers for that, whether people are really willing to pay for that kind of thing there, because without that, basically the grid, I mean, that's a general issue of the grid. I mean, the grid problems from weather issues and the reliability is, I'm trying to think of, I mean, we had our grid out for 6 hours. I mean, we'd have to go look at the outage outs and how long it takes them to repair it and do some forecasts of that. But yeah, no, I mean, it would be wonderful to do that, but I mean, it's more importantly to get Eversource, which won't do it in our neighborhoods, as to at what point they have to start burying all the distribution lines to avoid the outages and the extreme weather from climate change. I think we're going to be far down on the list because they're going to be burying lines in much more denser neighborhoods than Sherborn before they get around to doing that. But that's, I guess you'd have to look at the cost. It seems to me, I don't want to be pessimistic that it seems overly cost prohibitive.
Okay.
To do that from my own experience, but coming back, so there's a sense of how much if the consumers of this thing are our local neighborhood, that local neighborhood model would be basically people buying in the neighborhood into, I guess you'd have to think about what it means to have town land used for projects that are, whether the town is basically gets an income stream while the power from this thing goes to all the neighborhood households is what is one other mode. So,
Yeah, I mean, if the town were the owner investor, and this is Sherborn Power and Light, this kind of a project would produce very steady cash flow for a long time. That I think is a very positive aspect of this, is
right,
that
have to look at what people are willing to pay.
what people are willing to pay, exactly.
And how much that's dependent on whether they have this increased reliability from underground lines.
Yeah.
And whether this project at 100, even at 600 kilowatts, could bear the cost of underground lines. And who would even do that, and whether Eversource would like it, and the right of way and the easements. Because yeah, I mean, it's ambitious. That I mean, I see the appeal of it all. I'm not familiar enough with what the logistics would be to get the right of ways to do that, and whether and the cost of digging up the roads or along the side of the. I guess you'd almost have to put it in the road.
Right.
But whatever. I guess that's a question of whether that's a whole other scale of.
Well, I think
How
that
much-
would be, yeah, I think that would be future goals or future, possible ways of transforming the attribute. I think just so I could, if you don't mind me commenting, I believe that the PPA set up for the town, putting solar on and getting involved in a PPA to facilitate the solar from a private company that's just developing solar is, I believe, not in the best interest of the towns, because you don't have the flexibility of doing what you may be able to do with this as a community project, where the funders of the project or the LLC is set up so that it has, clear benefits in its structure, the way it's put together as Farm Pond Community Solar Project. And, investors would be attracted or not attracted to it because, you could build in attributes where it does benefit, underserved parts of the community, or it does benefit people at a reduced rate, partly the investors, maybe the town, maybe the town's own consumption. But either way, the town retains some ability to adapt over time and not be locked into a 20-25 year power purchase agreement, which is oftentimes has an escalator similar to the utility, and it's not a huge savings considering the LLCs that, the developers that set up those power purchase agreements oftentimes take all the benefits and don't give many of them to the town.
Yeah, I was hoping that if we did a community one, we could knock down what developers take as a 30% internal rate of return or something like that, and we'd find people in town who would live with the 10 or 20%, and that the power purchase agreement. I mean, the one we had now was 11 cents a kilowatt hour for 20 years flat. It's more worth it as a town to just do the flat rate. You could do a lower rate to begin and then do an escalator, but that's not worth it. But yeah, even if we knock it down to 8 or 9 cents or something like that, with community money that'll take a lower internal rate of return, like that 10% IRR or 11% that you have, be interesting to see if people would bite at that.
Sure.
I mean, because I'd like to think that as a community effort, people would want to bite at that, and it's pretty safe deal. But I don't know what the resulting PPA would be for that kind of, because I don't know whether your IRR is based on basically at 20 cents a kilowatt hour is what it's being sold for. And we'd have to, which is, I guess, what you get. Okay, there's a lot of little financing details or economics there that we could talk about. I'm just trying to think of the bigger picture now.
I think Michael, I think this is the question for this committee and I think the idea of a public forum to discuss this is exactly what this community needs. And maybe this is an example that we talk about, maybe there are others, but I think something, presenting an idea like this to the community in the fall, and doing a conversation about not just a project like this, but all the things that the energy committee is doing would heighten the awareness of this opportunity, and see what the financing possibilities are out there
Right.
like this.
I know we could prepare for that by even talking to the town to see a little bit more of their appetite for bonding versus whether you do this kind of community financing, and whether this project is a little more unique because of its broader than just a simple rooftop, because it's a whole vision for Farm Pond that there, I guess, I'd have questions like, it's still hard for me to believe that it's going to generate 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt, per kilowatt with all the trees around there. I don't know whether you've done that sort of shadow shading analysis that they have. I guess you said whether you had Aurora, I couldn't tell if that was your financing program or your solar program.
It's a combination, and I think the jury's out still on details of the exact trees overhanging and so forth. So I think those are further areas of a concern and address, and it more has to do with the aisleways that are there. And
right, yeah, since it's basically they're facing more of an east-west. I'm a little concerned that 1,000 that production number could be easily 20% high, given the shading and the orientation of the trees there. That I guess maybe in a way, because the number is going to drop that much, because I think probably might be worth doing a little bit more detail on what the solar production could be, because I'm concerned that it could be a lot less than that 1,000 number, because I've seen that rate, that 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt number used in sites that are much more open and with better orientation than this. So I would almost say, before, as part of talking again soon, is to really refine that production number for that kind of, given what's there, whether people would get the group that goes out there where they have their handheld meters, or people seem to be able to do it from the Google Maps or other kind of stuff, or other kind of things that they can use these LiDAR, and they can see density of stuff like that. I mean, I've had a few for my own house. I've had people do some interesting simulations from the aerial data that factored in the density of the tree cover and things like that to see what the production numbers will be, because I could believe that it's going to be a lot less than 1,000. So that gives me a little bit of pause there. The cost is an issue of that. A lot is just a factor of whether people buy into this wonderful vision of what Farm Pond could look like, with the green corridor that I assume it has as much parking as it has now, that we don't lose any parking when you find ways, because people are going to be sensitive about the number of parking spots.
That's all valid, Michael. I had some of the same comments, but it does open a broader vision for the town, which I think we should also keep on the drawing board. For example, if a similar array were, say, at Laurel Farm, over the parking area in the middle of the athletic fields, where there are 0 trees. I mean, it's interesting to look around town and see where the sites are that are already open, doesn't involve cutting trees, and that could be part of a solar collection system that's distributed around it, key areas of town. We haven't really done that. I mean, maybe you guys have, but I think it's.
We've started getting some info, and we've had some developers come in who give assessments of what's available on the buildings. We didn't get to it in the earlier part of our meeting. That I wanted to, of particular interest to me, is to start pulling together all those assessments of all the solar potential in town, on the town properties, to see how that balances against basically meeting all of our town's operating electricity needs, including building in the fact that hopefully at some point we get into electric vehicles, but we'd be phasing that in.
Right.
And then at what point do we expand to where the town actually does go beyond and what the legal, how you change the structure once you start selling electricity to the community from town land. And that might require a different ownership structure. Because, I mean, the message I got today, I was saying before, was that forget if the town's doing it on town land for town electricity use, that at the scale we're talking about, getting the town to finance it with its own bonding at the lower rates is clearly going to be the most cost-effective way, was a message I got. I'd like to prove that to myself by doing the numbers, which this example here, we can work together on doing that. But yeah, I think we want to do just what you said, Marion, is we could do the assessment and add in places like the canopies over parking, which tend to be more pricey than the rooftop. Because and the regional schools is almost like a separate project because it's a whole other district. It's a whole other political entity over there. So to me, I would probably focus on what we could do to wipe out all of our town's electricity. I mean, to meet all of our electricity needs from renewables on town property and do it in the least cost way. And whether it's town bonding or whether we find people to finance it is the game here that we have to work on, which we can work on together. It's getting towards 5:30, which is sort of the end of, it's beyond, and we've lost people. And I guess as a next step, I'd be happy to talk. I'd like to see more work on the production numbers for this particular project to make sure that we're not too off base on that side, as well as I can meet with people about, if other people are interested, just to play out some of these financing issues and the structure of this thing, just to see. I mean, you had some examples of how you do the financing. I have some other examples of my own that we could sort of agree on something and see what these different modes make a difference. Whether the developer mode or the community financing mode will ever is lower cost or can compete with town bonds. And then we could also feel out the town's appetite if we could do a mock-up of what the bonds could return and how profitable it is paying off our electric bills. We can go talk to the finance people in town just to see if they're even intrigued enough to talk about it somehow. So I could see meeting on just sort of doing the financing stuff. And I see more people leaving. I guess Chuck's gone, but Chuck is his 40th wedding anniversary. Congratulations to him. And if he's still around. Oh. Okay.
I think one of the things that we are excited about in this conversation is to start a dialogue and to see what, and I think, Michael, your questions about the town and the appetite is exactly right. So maybe that conversation with the Energy Committee could happen, and we find out what the options are with the town. And then in the meantime, we'll work on the production aspects of the project and clarify the shading issues and come back to you.
Sure, I could do that. And plus we'll have a little feed. I'll bring it up as a topic. We're redoing our charter for our committee and hopefully meeting with the select board on the 15th. And one of the issues to come up with is that that one of the major activities going forward is scoping out all these solar options like this and all the other town buildings. So this fits in perfectly with a major thrust that we want to do anyway. And this has a whole other fancier aesthetic than certainly the other projects we're looking at. So I thank you for getting this site rolling here. And even though
yeah, thank you very much, Michael, for allowing us to share. And I look forward to hearing some of the cliff notes of other things you are contemplating, and perhaps we can come up with more creativity of options in those areas as well.
Yeah, no, we'll get you the other proposals, the other stuff we have. Some of it with the files were too large. Like we got something for Pine Hill, but I couldn't figure out. I didn't figure out how to make my Dropbox into a site that I could share.
No, that's no problem. Yeah.
So we'll exchange more information, and we can talk again soon, within the next week or two.
Great.
And we're gonna, we didn't figure out, I guess I have to figure out when we're meeting next, in a few weeks or not. But whatever, but I agree with you. Let's try to see what we get done in the next month or two, so we can start a conversation with the town more in the fall and stuff like that.
Perfect.
It's cooler and we're sweating less and whatever else. Okay,
With any luck.
yes. With the four of us left, that will end it there. Poor Gino has to be here because he's the one who controls the Zoom. Although unless he could have turned me over as a host, but
Gino,
no,
before we end, do you have any thoughts as a planning conversation around this?
No, I think it's, very exciting, and we need to continue to work on the details.
yeah, no, Gino's part of, I mean, in terms of his role on the sustainability coordinator is working on the municipal energy issues, which basically greening our electricity supply for town operations is sort of in his bailiwick. So this will be something we'll all be doing together here. Okay, this is great. Appreciate the effort. So we'll be in
Thank you.
touch. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
nice
See you
meeting you
later.
guys. Okay, see you. Artemis.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.